clay, bark, wood, fire. That's the entire list. No electricity, no insulation, no engineering degree, and not a single iron nail anywhere in the building. And with those 4 things, the Cherokee built winter homes that kept families alive through the worst the Appalachian Mountains could throw at them. Now, before I show you how, I need you to forget everything you think you know about surviving a cold climate, because the Appalachians do not kill you the way the northern plains do. Out on the plains, the enemy is dry, screaming, 40 below air. In these mountains, the temperature might only be 35 degrees, and that is so much worse. Because the Appalachian winter kills you with water, freezing rain, wet snow that soaks instead of dusting, fog that rises off the ground and settles into everything you own, 90% humidity at just above freezing. And anyone who has ever spent a night outside in cold rain knows this in their bones. A wet person at 35 degrees is in more danger than a dry person at 20 below. Water pulls the heat out of a human body many times faster than air ever could. Damp clothing doesn't insulate, it drains you. So the real question was never how the Cherokee stayed warm. The real question is how they stayed dry. And once you understand that, everything about these houses changes. Forget the picture of a crude hut thrown together against the weather. These were not shelters, these were living systems. And there are 3 things I'm going to show you about them. First, the walls of this house did something no modern wall in your home can do. They breathed. And that is what kept people alive. Second, the Cherokee did not have one house. They had 2. And the winter house was designed around a principle that runs against absolutely everything we build today. And third, this house had a name. When Europeans first crawled inside one, they did not call it a shelter. They called it the hot house, and you are going to understand exactly why when I tell you what happened to them once they got in there. So let me show you the house, and then let me show you what happened to the fire inside it. It starts before a single post goes into the ground, with the choice of where to build at all. Cherokee builders read the land first, looking for a site that sat out of the path of the cold wind, and, just as importantly, away from the low ground where damp collects and never leaves. The earth banked around the structure then went to work as a thermal buffer, smoothing out the swing between a mild afternoon and a brutal night. And on that site, they raised a frame. Hardwood posts set into the ground for strength, and then, woven horizontally between them, a lattice of flexible green saplings bent, laced, and tied into a basket the size of a room. Over that basket went the clay. Not a thin coat, but layer after layer of clay, mixed with natural fiberglass. And in some cases, animal hair pressed into the weave from both sides until the lattice disappeared. And as it dried, that mixture cured into a dense shell, hard as stone. Now here is the part I promised you, the thing your walls at home cannot do. A concrete wall blocks moisture. A drywall panel blocks moisture. And when you block moisture, it does not disappear. It condenses on the wall. In your clothes, in your bedding, clay does not block moisture. Clay drinks it. Think about what is actually happening inside that house on a January night. A dozen people breathing for 10 straight hours. A stew steaming over the fire. Wet hides, wet moccasins, snow melting off somebody's shoulders. In a sealed modern room, all of that water has to go somewhere, and where it goes is into your bed. But in a clay house, the walls pull the excess humidity into their own body, hold it, and then hand it back later, slowly, as the air dries out, all night long, with no moving parts and no power source. Damp wall. Dry family. And in the Appalachians, dry is not a comfort. Dry is survival. Today, the building industry actually has a word for this hygroscopic, moisture-regulating material. It gets sold as a premium feature in high-end sustainable homes. The Cherokee was simply living inside it, for centuries. And the shape of that shell mattered too. It was round, fewer corners exposed to the wind, less surface area for heat to escape through, and no dead pockets where the cold could sit and wait. Warmth from the central fire moved evenly through the whole space instead of pooling on one side. Every curve was doing a job. Those clay walls ran anywhere from 4 to 8 inches thick, and the entire structure was tied together with natural cordage, not one iron nail in the building. That mattered more than it sounds. Nails hold wood rigid, and rigid wood cracks when the humidity swings. Bound joints let the frame swell and shrink with the seasons instead of splitting. The house aged alongside the forest. Which brings me to the second thing I owe you, and it's the one that surprises people most. The Cherokee did not have a house. They had two. There was the summer house, large, rectangular, tall, open at the sides, deliberately built to let the humid Appalachian summer air move straight through it. And then, standing right beside it, there was something else entirely, smaller, much lower, round, and dug partway down into the ground. It had a name. The Cherokee called it the AC. And here is what runs against every modern building instinct we have. Their winter solution was not to build a better house. It was to build a smaller one. Think about how we do it. We build big, and then we spend the rest of our lives fighting to heat all that empty air. The Cherokee went the other direction on purpose. Less volume means less air to warm. Less surface area means fewer places for heat to leak out. And sinking the floor below grade means the earth itself is wrapped around you on every side, holding you at its own steady temperature. The AC was often too low to stand upright inside. That was not a limitation. That was the design. At the center burned the fire, and everything in the room was arranged around it. Warm air rose off the flames, ran along the curved ceiling, and circled back down the walls into the living space. No cold corners, no hot corners, just an even, slow rotation of heat. And all day, those thick clay walls were quietly soaking that heat into themselves. Then, hours after the flames had died down, they gave it back. Engineers call it thermal mass. What it meant in practice was that a family could hold a comfortable house through a January night on a shockingly small amount of firewood. Every material was doing a job, every curve was doing a job, and every flame was doing three, because the smoke was never waste. Rising through the roof, it cured and preserved the timbers above, drove out insects that would otherwise eat the frame, and continuously flushed and renewed the air inside. That air came in through a smoke hole high in the roof, pulling against a doorway set deliberately, almost absurdly, low. Cold air is heavy, so when the door opened, it stayed down at the floor and slid straight toward the fire that was waiting to burn it. The warm air stayed up high, where the people were, and never spilled out. You did not walk into an assy. You crouched, and you crawled. And that uncomfortable little doorway is exactly what kept the heat from walking out every time somebody came home. Over the whole shell went sheets of bark, overlapped like shingles, shedding rain and melting snow off the frame beneath. Its rough layers trapping little pockets of dead air, one more blanket. And when the snow came and settled on the roof, it became one more blanket still. So add it all up. A small house, sunk into the ground, thick clay walls, bark shingles, snow on the roof, and a fire burning at the dead center of it. The question you should be asking now is not whether it got warm enough, because for the last 10 minutes, I have been asking you the wrong question. And you've been asking it too. How did they stay warm enough? Europeans came into the Appalachians in the 1700s and 1800s, and some of them were invited to spend a winter night inside one of these houses. And when they wrote about it afterward, they did not describe a cozy little shelter holding its own against the cold. They described an oven, stifling, suffocating, thick with smoke, and so hot that grown men had to crawl back out through that low doorway, into the freezing night, just to breathe and cool off before they could go back in. That is why they gave it the name they gave it. They didn't call it a lodge, or a hut, or a shelter. They called it the hot house. So let that reset everything you just heard. The Cherokee were never struggling to get warm enough. They had built a machine so efficient that their problem was the opposite one. And once you know that, the next question is the one that actually matters. Who got to sleep in all that heat? Not the strongest. The AC was not simply where a family bedded down every night of the year. It was where you put the people who could no longer generate enough heat to keep themselves alive. The elderly, the sick, the newborns, the ones a hard Appalachian winter would have taken first. Sit with that for a second, because it tells you more about these people than any wall ever could. They didn't design their best technology around the strongest members of the village. They built it around the weakest. And I'd argue that's the real measurement of a civilization, not how high it can build, but who it builds for. Inside, everything served that same purpose. The hearth at the center, sleeping platforms ringed around it. Storage pushed back against the walls to keep the middle open so the warm air could keep turning. Even the way people moved was economical. Fewer trips, fewer openings of that door, less heat walking out into the dark. And through the long nights, the fire did work no wall could do. Elders told the stories that carried the history. Craftsmen repaired tools for a spring that was still months away. Women wove baskets and worked stored food. Children learned by watching, and then by helping, and then by doing. Firewood was rationed. Nothing was wasted. That fire wasn't just heating a family. It was where an entire people rewrote themselves, out loud, every single night. And that fire at the center of the Asai was never allowed to go out. Some families kept it burning continuously, banked and fed and carried forward, across generations. Remember that, because it is the only thing in this entire story that survives to the end. Part 5. The Fire That Walked. 12, 15, to 330 words plus CTA. None of this happened by accident, and none of it happened quickly. Cherokee builders cut their timber in the season when the wood was least vulnerable to insects and rot. They took their clay from specific deposits they knew produced a stronger, longer-lasting wall. And they timed the construction itself so the clay could dry slowly and evenly, without cracking, giving every material the months it needed to reach full strength. Their craftsmanship depended on patience as much as it depended on skill. Today we have names for every single thing they were doing. Thermal mass, passive heating, natural ventilation, hygroscopic materials. Architects call it sustainable design, and they sell it back to us as cutting-edge technology. But I'm not going to tell you that the AC was better than the house you're sitting in right now. That would flatten a much richer story than that. Their achievement was never building the best house. It was building the right house, for that exact place, and that is the thing we have very nearly forgotten how to do. So here is the last promise I owe you. These houses never failed. Not one of them ever lost to a winter. In 1838, the Cherokee were forced out of the Appalachians. Thousands of people were driven more than 1,000 miles west, into Oklahoma, marching through the cold. By many estimates, something close to a quarter of them did not survive the journey, and the houses stayed exactly where they were. The clay walls kept breathing, the bark kept shedding water. The earth beneath the floor kept releasing the heat it had borrowed from the summer before, precisely as designed, precisely on schedule. The machine still worked perfectly. There was simply no one left inside it. But this is the part I need you to hear. They could not carry the walls. They could not carry the clay, or the bark, or the roof, or the ground. But there are accounts that say the Cherokee carried the fire. Coals sheltered, guarded, passed from hand to hand, kept alive, across 1,000 miles of road. The house stayed behind. The fire walked with them. And I think that is the real lesson buried inside Cherokee architecture. You can take a people's walls. You cannot take the thing those walls were built to protect. They did not conquer nature. They learned from it. And they left us with something worth remembering. A resilient home is never really made of strong walls. It's made of people who know exactly why they built them. So which part surprised you most? The walls that breathed? The house so efficient it became an oven? Or the fire that walked 1,000 miles? Tell me in the comments. And tell me which forgotten machine you want next. The Viking longhouse, heated by earth, cattle, and one long fire. The Athabascan winter house, built to beat 40 below. Or the Inuit snow shelter, the only home on earth made out of the very thing trying to kill you. Subscribe to Dark Origins, and let's keep uncovering the knowledge history very nearly left behind.